The Lankavatara Sutra and the teaching of Zen Buddhism. Preliminary note. The study of the Lankavatara may best be approached in its especial relation to the teaching and history of Zen Buddhism. It was principally due to Bodhidharma, father of the Zen in China, that the sutra came to be prominently taken notice of by students of Buddhism, and it was mainly by his followers that its study was systematically carried on and its commentaries written. This has already been mentioned. It is true that the Yogacara school, or the Dharmalakshit J.B. sect of Chinese and Japanese Buddhism makes frequent references to it as supporting the psychological theories of their school. But this side of the sutra is incidental, its chief theme being the doctrine of self-realization. Whatever psychology, or logic, or metaphysics it may contain, is to prove the main doctrine. The sutra is by no means systematically developed as has been repeatedly noticed, but the current running underneath the whole text is unmistakable. There is no doubt that this underneath current, in spite of the memorandum-like nature of the sutra, is in closest touch with the teaching of Bodhidharma and his school. The study of the sutra, however, has not been so vigorously prosecuted as that of other Mahayana sutras, such as the Saddharmapult, Arika, Vimalakirti, Avatari Isaka, Sukhavati Vyuha. This neglect has especially been the case with the followers of Zen, who ought to have studied it most seriously, but whose indifference to philosophy and cognate subjects is notorious. Added to this, the fact that the sutra, not only in the Chinese translations but in the original Sanskrit, presents many difficulties in grammar and in meaning, has increased the continued neglect of it. But the time is ripe for us to take it up and subject it to a serious study now that we have the Sanskrit edition completed by the unceasing efforts of the late Dr. Bunyu Nanjo. It is my intention here to treat it as the sutra par excellence in relation to the Zen teaching of Buddhism. While Zen as a rule abhors any connection with one special sutra or sastra, the undeniable fact remains that the Lankavatara was the book handed by Bodhidharma to his first disciple Hui Ke, as the sutra containing the essential teachings of his school. This being the case, it is natural for his followers of the present time to renew the investigation and study of it. Besides, no religious experience can stand outside a more or less intellectual interpretation of it. Zen may like to ignore its literary or philosophical side, and it is justified in doing so, no doubt, but to think that this implies the absolute ignoring of all attempts at any form of interpretation would be a grievous error. Part 1. A general survey of the principal ideas expounded in the sutra. The breadth of Mahayana Buddhism. Buddhism, especially Mahayana Buddhism so called, is like a vast ocean where all kinds of living beings are allowed to thrive in a most generous manner, almost one verging on a chaos. Students who lightly step into it generally find it too complicated and overwhelming for their logical comprehension. But the fact is that Mahayana Buddhism is the outcome of long years of development of a religious system among a people furnished with a most fertile imagination. The student has to be patient. The best method of study may probably be found by taking up one principal Mahayana sutra at a time, and examining its contents historically, philosophically, and psychologically. The Chinese scholars encountered the same difficulties centuries ago. And as in those days, there was no lower or higher criticism of the sacred texts, every tradition was respected on its face value. The scholars exhausted their ingenuity to make a logical, humanly plausible arrangement among the vast treasure of literature brought over from India and all claiming to have been delivered by the Buddha himself. This untenable position is now abandoned, and each sutra has come to be studied, historically, critically, and analytically. Each principal sutra may now be regarded as marking a certain stage or phase of development in the history of Mahayana Buddhism, which is indeed too huge and unwieldy to be handled as one solid piece of work completed within a few decades. What, then, does the Lankavatara signify in the composite system of Mahayana Buddhism? What phase does it represent in the long history of Buddhism? What in short is the message of the Lankavatara as we have it now? What function does it or did it perform in the conservation of Buddhist thought and experience? Each principal sutra has had its special work to accomplish in the unfoldment of the religious consciousness of the Buddhists. For instance, the Saddharma Purika marks the epoch in the history of Buddhism when Sakyamuni ceased to be conceived of as a historical personage subject to the fate of all transient beings. For he is no more a human Buddha, but one who lives through eternity for the benefit of all creatures. All that he is recorded to have done in history is no more than one of his skillful means to save mankind. So we read, I show the place of extinction, I reveal to all beings a device to educate them, albeit I do not become extinct at the time, and in this very place. That is, Mount Gridrakuta. I continue preaching the Dharma. Here I rule, myself as well as all beings. But men of perverted minds in their delusion do not see me standing here. Laying the opinion that my body is completely extinct. They pay worship in many ways to the relics, but me they see not. They feel, however, a certain aspiration by which their minds become right. When such upright, mild, and gentle creatures leave off their bodies, then I assemble the crowd of disciples and show myself here on the Gridrakuta. And I speak thus to them in this very place. I was not completely extinct at the time. It was but a device of mine, monks. Repeatedly am I born in the world of the living. ... I see how the creatures are afflicted, but I do not show them my proper being. Let them first have an aspiration to see me. Then I will reveal to them the true Dharma. The Suvanaprabhasa, at least in part, belongs to the same period, when it says, every drop in the oceans may be counted up, but the age of Sakyamuni is altogether beyond calculation. Mount Sumeru may be pulverized and every particle is countable, but the age of Sakyamuni is altogether beyond calculation. However innumerable, every particle of dust composing the great earth may be counted up, but not the age of the victorious one. How a boundless space is, its ends may be reached, but the age of Sakyamuni is altogether beyond calculation. However long one may live through hundreds of kotis of eons, he cannot count up the age of the Buddha. There are two deeds whereby a man's life is prolonged. Not to kill others and to give away much food. For this reason the age of the great man cannot be measured, it is like the measure of kalpas which are incalculable. Therefore, harbor not any shadow of doubt as to the age of the victorious one which is indeed beyond the reach of measurement. Buddhist experience which ceased to be wholly satisfied with the intellectual presentation of the doctrine of enlightenment. When Buddhists began to be oppressed with the idea of sin and doubt hanging over them too heavily and acutely. Read the following in which the destiny of those bodhisattvas, as is described, who have not yet come to have an absolute faith in the wisdom of the Buddha, but who try to save themselves by amassing their own stock of merit. And, O Ajita, there might be a dungeon belonging to an anointed Kshatriya king, inlaid entirely with gold and beryl, in which cushions, garlands, wreaths, and strings are fixed, having canopies of different colors and kinds, covered with silk cushions, scattered over with various flowers and blossoms, scented with excellent scents, adorned with arches, courts, windows, pinnacles, fireplaces, and terraces, covered with nets of bells of the 7 kinds of gems, having 4 angels, 4 pillars, 4 doors, 4 stairs. And the son of that king, having been thrown into the dungeon for some misdeed, is there, bound with a chain made of the Jambonada gold. And suppose there is a couch prepared for him, covered with many woolen cloths, spread over with cotton and feather cushions, having kalinga coverings, and carpets, together with coverlids, red on both sides, beautiful and charming. There might be brought to him much food and drink, of various kinds, pure and well prepared. What do you think, O Ajita, would the enjoyment be great for that prince? Ajita said, Yes, it would be great, O Bhagavat. The Bhagavat said, What do you think, O Ajita? Would he even taste it there and notice it, or would he feel any satisfaction from it? He said, No, indeed, O Bhagavat. But, on the contrary, when he had been led away by the king and thrown into the dungeon, he would only wish for deliverance from there. He would seek for the nobles, princes, ministers, women, elders, householders, and lords of castles, who might deliver him from that dungeon. Moreover, O Bhagavat, there is no pleasure for that prince in that dungeon, nor is he liberated, until the king shows him favor. The Bhagavat said, Thus, O Ajita, it is with those bodhisattvas who, having fallen into doubt, amass a stock of merit, but doubt the knowledge of the Buddha. It is very interesting to contrast these passages from the Sukhavati Vyuha with the thought pervading the Prajnaparamita Sutra. For the Prajnaparamita, dwelling on the conception of unreality or emptiness, seeks deliverance from the dungeon of existence. Or rather interprets the Buddhist realization purely from a metaphysical point of view. The doctrine of sunyata constituting the keynote of the Prajnaparamita is really the foundation of all the Mahayana schools of Buddhism, including even the Yogacara. What is known as primitive Buddhism denied the existence of an ego substance, but its conception of the external world was that of the naive realist. The Prajnaparamita philosopher insists on the non-existence of a particular body as such, that is, as an objective reality whose identity is absolute. Every being or every object, as he sees it, is relative, impermanent, and not worth attachment. This Prajnaparamita idea of unreality, or emptiness as the literal sense of the term sunyata is the foundation of the Buddhist theory of nature. Thus, in the Prajnaparamita, supreme enlightenment is identified with the attainment of sunyata. In other words, the object of the Buddhist life is to find an unattached abode in this realization. This abode is called a pratisthita, not abiding. Hence the noted phrase in the Diamond Sutra. The Tathagata has no dwelling place in the sense that all his thoughts and doings have no exterior or ulterior objects in view to which he desires to adapt himself. And therefore that he is like the sun that shines on everybody just and unjust. Or like the lily in the field that blooms in its best even when there is nobody around to admire its supra-Solomonic array. So we have again in the Ashtasahasrika, Chapter 2, p. 34. A bodhisattva-Mahasattva should abide himself in the perfection of prajna by abiding in emptiness. The Tathagata is so called because he is not abiding anywhere. His mind has no abode neither in things created nor in things uncreated, and yet it is not away from them. This is the message of all the sutras belonging to the Prajnaparamita class. As to the Avivsaka Sutra, it is really the consummation of Buddhist thought, Buddhist sentiment, and Buddhist experience. To my mind, no religious literature in the world can ever approach the grandeur of conception, the depths of feeling, and the gigantic scale of composition, as attained by this sutra. It is the eternal fountain of life from which no religious mind will turn back athirst or only partially satisfied. It is a great pity that this magnificent literature still remains concealed in a language not so universally accessible. Here not only deeply speculative minds find satisfaction, but humble spirits and heavily oppressed hearts, too, will have their burdens lightened. Abstract truths are so concretely, so symbolically represented here that one will finally come to a realization of the truth that even in a particle of dust the whole universe is seen reflected. Not this visible universe only, but a vast system of universes, conceivable by the highest minds only. Towards the end of this section I have translated the 10 vows of the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra as given in the final chapter of the Gandharvas, which forms a part of the Chinese Avatamsaka. The teaching of the Lankavatara. Where does the Lankavatara stand then? It may be classed in a way with the Avatamsaka in as much as it teaches the absolute idealism of the latter and is the disclosure of the inner mind of the Buddha. But it has a special message to give to the Buddhist world in a manner characteristic of the sutra. It is devoid of all symbolism, quite different in this respect from Avatmnsaka. It is, instead, straightforward in expression and notes down in a somewhat sketchy style almost all the ideas belonging to the different schools of Mahayana Buddhism. It is partly for this reason that the sutra requires a great deal of learning as well as an insight to understand all the details thoroughly. The principal thesis of the Lankavatara, however, may be regarded as summarized in the following passage. Again, O Mahamati, there may be other Sramanas and Brahmans who hold the following views. That all things have no self-substance, they are like a cloud, like a circle traced out by a revolving firebrand, or like the air castle of the Gandharvas. That they are unborn, that they are like Maya, or mirage, or the moon in water, or a dream. That external objects are manifestations of the mind erroneously perceived due to false discrimination since time immemorial. That by thus viewing the world one ceases to be conditioned by the false discrimination worked out in one's own mind. One does away with the terminology belonging to such false discrimination and with the signification of words such as predicating and predicated. That when one understands that the body, property, and abiding place are the particularizations of the Alayaijnana, one is freed from ideas such as perceived and perceiving, attains to a state of no image, or shadowlessness. O Mahamati, such a body sattva-Mahasattva will before long realize the sameness of samsara and nirvana. O Mahamati, by deeds of great love, skillful means, and effortlessness, a bodhisattva reviews all beings and knows that they are like Maya, they resemble shadows, they are not produced by causes. And, further, knowing that the world exists not outside the mind, he leads a life of formlessness. As he gradually goes up the higher stages, he will realize a state of samadhi where he comes to the understanding that the triple world is mind itself. The samadhi he attains is called Maya-like. He will further free himself from all images, perfect his knowledge, and realize that things are unborn, and entering upon the samadhi called Vajravimbapama, will obtain the Buddha body. He will, always abiding in the suchness of things, manifest himself in transformed bodies. He will be endowed with the 10 powers, the 6 psychic faculties, and the 10-fold self-mastery. O Mahamati, adorned with upaya, he will visit all the Buddha lands. and disengaged from the philosophical doctrines as well as from the citta, manas, and vijnana, he will experience a revulsion within himself and by degrees will attain the Tathagata Bodhi. Therefore, O Mahamati, if a bodhisattva wishes to attain the Tathagata Bodhi, he should keep himself away from the skandhas, dhehatas, ayatanas, sittam, causation, works, discipline, birth, staying and passing, and cease from discriminating, philosophizing, and abide in the thought of the mind only. When the triple world is surveyed by the bodhisattva, he perceives that this existence is due to memory that has been accumulated since the beginningless past, but wrongly interpreted. He recognizes that Buddhahood is a state imageless, unborn, and to be inwardly experienced by oneself, when the mind becomes fully controlled and purposeless deeds are accomplished. Like the Sintamai, he will now manifest himself in a variety of forms according to the needs of sentient beings and lead him to the view that only mind is, and then gradually compel him to ascend the stages. Therefore, O Mahamati, let the bodhisattva discipline himself well in the work of self-realization. Being full of technical terms, the reader may find the import of the passage here quoted difficult to understand, but as we go on, it will, I hope, grow fully intelligible. In the meantime, the following paraphrase will help the reader to get a general idea of it. The highest stage of Buddhist experience is reached when a man comes to realize that things are devoid of a self-substance.